Hey folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, we're going to talk about the Lions and the training camp and the Super Bowl that they're going to win in January, apparently. You've not been out there yet to predict that, but I'm sure you will. But before we do that, we have some breaking news for this podcast. I mean, when does that ever happen, right? And of course, it's going to be about Jim Harbaugh, because here we have the Lions with the most anticipated season in 30 years. And Jim Harbaugh is going to usurp that, at least for our podcast this week, because that's how it goes with this guy, with this school. It's just how it is. Tony Garcia, who covers Michigan for us for the Detroit Free Press, is in to talk about what's happening and what may happen. And all I know is that, probably the reports Carlos, is that Harbaugh is in negotiation with his school and the NCAA about a potential 4-game suspension to start the season. And let's just let Tony, if it's okay with you, Carlos, let's let Tony take it away. What's happening, Tony? What's the latest?
Well, first of all, good to see you guys. And you set the table well. And I would say not only is it the Lions' most anticipated season in 30 years, and there have been many anticipated Michigan football seasons, I would put this at the top. Certainly. I was, just as this Jim Harbaugh news broke, I was working on a 5 things story, 5 sort of storylines to watch. As I'm headed down once I'm turned around. I was on my way to Indianapolis to go to Big Ten Media Day when I got the call from you guys to jump on this podcast. So I turned back around to head home. And so we are that close to talking to him. And I was writing the story about all the things and all the storylines and all the positivity that Michigan football and all the momentum they had. Certainly the national championship, if not the number 1 favorite, number 2. And I don't know if this changes that. We'll get to that. But yeah, as you said, Jim Harbaugh, it looks like he will be gone for the first 4 games of the 2023 season. Yahoo first reported it. I've since had multiple people confirm to me that is the expectation. Same with offensive coordinator Sharon Moore, and same with tight ends coach Grant Newsome. So this all started with a number of level 2 investigations about 2.5 years ago, back in 21, that were, in the grand scheme of things, relatively mundane. Recruiting violations, such as speaking to recruits during COVID-19 dead periods, and having offensive analysts on the field, coaching and on field duties, as opposed to coaches instead of analysts who are supposed to be off field, coaches who are watching workouts via Zoom. So all breaking the rules, all tisk things you should not do, certainly. But these are level 2 violations in NCAA hierarchy of things. And the people who I've spoken with tell me they believe Jim Harbaugh, all 3 of these gentlemen who are involved in this on Michigan's side, would have received 1-game suspensions for those violations. However, what put things over the edge is when the NCAA first asked Jim Harbaugh about these events and certain things, such as this infamous burger and meal at a restaurant that does not need to be named downtown Ann Arbor. There were receipts that were presented to the NCAA saying, look, this meal was purchased here. Jim Harbaugh, when he was asked about it, said he does not remember. Now, those who know Jim Harbaugh know he is very, I think the word is quirky. He's just kind of an odd dude. And so he was being, I don't want to get too much into it, but the way it's been presented to me and the way he has maintained is he does not remember this thing. He is not lying, but he does not remember that meal, that day, what have you. Whether that's true or whether that's not is not up to me, is not up to really any of us to decide. That was between the NCAA and Michigan, and that's what this negotiation, investigation has been going on for the last couple of years about. And essentially, it has concluded that Harbaugh did mislead these investigators. And they are now, I don't know if compromising is the right word, but now the result is it looks like Jim Harbaugh will be suspended for 4 games. Now, from what I've been told, Michigan has sent a letter saying as much and requesting as much from the NCAA Committee of Infractions, who will then have 30 days to accept, reject, or change the penalty. But from what I'm told, everybody is expecting Jim Harbaugh will be gone for the first 4 games of the season.
So, whether it's sports or, something that really matters, like politics and presidential shenanigans, like Richard Nixon could probably tell you, it's usually not the crime, it's the cover-up, right? And that's what the NCAA is angry about, is we're presenting you these facts, this proof that you did this, and you're in denial. Just like somebody taking a witness stand in front of a subcommittee, right? I do not recall. They lean over to their lawyer. I don't recall. Maybe that'll save them. But I can understand the NCAA's, frustration with this, of you need to own up to this. And I think that's what we heard at the beginning of all of this, right? Was these are going to be level 2 violations. It's a slap on the wrist, whatever, frivolous. Who knows what Jim Harbaugh's thinking? Maybe he doesn't really remember. Maybe he thinks this is ticky-tack. Why are you guys coming down on us? But what does this do, Tony? I mean, beyond launching, maybe the J Harbaugh era, right? The first 4 games. So what does this do for Michigan? I mean, a tailspin, first 4 games, they all seem pretty cakewalky. What do you think happens if he's not coaching on the sidelines? Who is taking over? What does this do to the start of that program on their march to an NCAA championship?
So you say that tongue in cheek. I'm not sure if this derails that because of how the season sets up. Now, let's say this is 2024, where you have a Texas early on and a front-loaded Big Ten schedule. This looks very different. But Michigan, I mean, Jim Harbaugh, when we spoke with him in June, he was lauding his staff and how prepared they are and how many guys they have ready who are already ready to be NCAA Power 5 head coaches. Now, Sharon Moore is certainly seen or perceived to be at the top of that list, and the expectation is he'll be gone week 1 as well. So as far as names that I'm looking out for, it's either Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator, Mike Hart, running backs coach, or perhaps Jay Harbaugh. But Steve Clinkscale even is a very capable option. I would guess maybe one of those 2 defensive coordinators, because they have 2 defensive guys. It would just sort of split duties a little easier. But I think they are not too concerned, frankly, when you see the way the schedule lines up, starting with East Carolina and UNLV, and it's just not a tough schedule.
Now, let's be honest. Like you said, East Carolina, UNLV, then Bowling Green, Rutgers, all at home. Can a semi-competent Tony Garcia beat these teams as head coach of Michigan? I mean, is that crazy to think? Or come on.
You need someone with a lot more capability than me. But no, it is not a difficult non-conference schedule. And to get back to your original question of what does this do to Michigan, I could see a way in which it galvanizes them, right? Now, these days, I mean, this is all 2021 early NIL dealings. I mean, if you think about, and this is not to excuse it. I mean, Jim Harbaugh I'm not trying to accuse nor deny, and so maybe the word is not correct. It's hard when you're reacting immediately on a podcast, right? As opposed to having a few moments to think about the right word to write. But caught, right? He got caught up in this situation. And so in the landscape of college football, it all looks very different. And so I don't think this affects Michigan all that much long term as far as recruits, as far as, you're playing SEC, like money ball or dirty ball. Now, where this does hurt Michigan is where Michigan has always liked to have the feather in its cap of the moral superiority, right? And Jim Harbaugh, I believe it was our own Reiner Saban who asked him the question about this investigation many months ago, and when we spoke to him in the winter and about what was going on, and just, I mean, we've seen a number of things with this program, right? Matt Weiss fired for the investigations. You got Shemi Schembechler and his hiring and quick dismissal. That's on the heels of situations last year with Donovan Edwards, with Mozzie Smith. There have been a number of headlines that are derailing the momentum. And Jim Harbaugh said, look, if you compare us to perfect, we're going to come up short. But if you compare us to others, it doesn't get much better. Those words don't ring a bit more hollow today because there are not that many coaches receiving 4-game suspensions. There just aren't. And so how Michigan responds, I mean, they are so incredibly talented that they're going to be 4-0. They will certainly be 4-0 still. That's not changing. I wonder I would not see any riff in the locker room. Now, it's been a long time since we've got to see all these guys. Right now, I've caught up with a few of them individually here and there throughout the summer. But in a full team setting, we're many months removed. But that locker room, last we spoke to them, quite strong. And I think this is more embarrassing than anything.
I can see in this podcast already, if we just throw, Michigan's moral superiority in the headline or something, we're going to get a lot more Michigan State fans listening to this podcast because, Michigan has a big target on its back, right? I mean, the Block M, the program, everything, and Harbaugh specifically speaking to that, right? We look better than a lot of programs. Do they lose the high ground, the moral high ground when this happens?
That's a tough question. Well, that's saying, do you have the moral high ground to begin with? which I guess is a separate question. And that's not a knock one way or the other. That's just its own question. I don't think these infractions are not a big deal. So if you think if you did have that moral high ground to begin with, then maybe no, because really at the end of the day, what this comes down to is, yes, breaking some rules, but this is not a dollar bill self situation where you hear about hundreds of thousands of dollars in bags and meetups and all the crazy stories. This is $30. This is a burger. This is a coach monitoring a workout, right? And again, this is not excusing it, but this is not like the end of the world. And Jim Harbaugh he is still maintaining to this day, he did not lie. So no, he did not get caught, which is why caught was the wrong word. He got caught up or stuck in this kerfuffle. That's how he sees it. He's just in it. And whether that's true or not is for every individual to decide. But I don't see this derailing Michigan and as far as their moral superiority, I don't think whatever side you stood on before this, I don't think you're on the other side of it after. I think you're still there.
No, nothing's going to change at all. It's in the moral superiority. Who thinks that? Michigan alums, although not all alums, right? The fan base in particular, to some degree. That's why they don't make any noise at the stadium. I mean, that's the joke, right? The khakis, and they're quiet. And
they sing to Mr. Brightside. Come on.
All of that kind of stuff. Yeah, the student section does. But I don't know what that, in terms of that and how people see the university, the people that, this isn't going to make anybody think, oh, wow, I thought they were the most moral university in the country, who was not a Michigan person. I mean, I don't know that those people were out there to begin with, but they're not going to all of a sudden say, oh, my God, they lost the high ground. Well, what does that even mean, right?
But what is
I think it's semantics.
Is this not red meat for Ohio State and Michigan State just to come after? I mean, public enemy number one's there, Harbaugh. I mean, for those two schools and just about every other Big Ten school, pretty much, So to come out to be able to say, and you're right, Tony, it's hard to pronounce judgment. We don't know what Harbaugh really thought, what he really remembered, whatever, but it's going to read outside of Ann Arbor, outside of Schembechler, it's going to read that Michigan either did something wrong. It's mostly going to read as a cover up. That Harbaugh really tried to stiff arm the NCAA investigators and wasn't completely truthful because he thought, hey, I'm Jim Harbaugh. This is Michigan, come at me, whatever. And getting suspended for 4 games, I mean, that's a pretty big slap on the wrist. It's not even more than a slap on the wrist. So this is going to give other teams license to say Michigan isn't exactly, and as you listed all the issues that they've had recently, I mean, that gives them a lot of ammunition to say Michigan is not really the Michigan they thought they were, right?
I think you're absolutely right. However, what does that matter? I think that's the actual question, because anybody can say that. And let's say, for sake of argument, that it's true. You still have to win on the field. And if Michigan goes 12-0 again in the regular season, Ohio State and Michigan State can say, oh, you think you're all high and mighty, but really you're scummy. Your coach is getting suspended. And Michigan is back in Indy again, right? So all that's going to matter, as it always does, is what happens on the field. And it's as simple as that.
Let me ask you this, though. Here's where it does matter, not on the field, but in living rooms when they're recruiting. And when you're fighting for that kid who's either going to go to Michigan or Ohio State, and you tell their parents you want to go play for a coach who's lying about stuff, if he's lying to the NCAA, Maybe he's going to lie to your kid. Maybe he's going to lie to your parents about what's being guaranteed, about whatever. Do you want to go play for that coach, or do you want to go play for our coach who's never been suspended by the NCAA, who's never been investigated? We've never, that could future ramifications possibly, right?
There's no chance that Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State coaches are not saying exactly that. Of course they are, or now they're about to, right? And the other thing I was going to say is who are the other programs recruiting at 5-star? Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, Georgia, Penn State. They're all happy to get a burger for someone or do the same thing. Right?
Or a lot more, right?
Wouldn't be the first time. Texas A&M.
Miami.
That's
they're trying to get into that space, and by comparison, maybe they lose a little bit moral high ground. Maybe Michigan State fans can get in the comment sections of all the organizations that cover them and duke it out with some fresh material. But beyond that, they're getting into a different space. It's a big boy space, and now you know what I mean.
Although I do think I should make it clear, just personally, I think that it probably should. Jim Harbaugh has for a long time used this high ground, this all throughout last year. If you remember the events of last year and everything that transpired and the way he talked about doing things right. This is
went after Ohio State, Tony, didn't he? Remember he got into it with Ryan Day. That's what led to we're going to hang 100 on him.
He got into it with Ohio State, with Penn State, and Michigan State. Now, of course, that's the nature of the business, and all coaches get into it with one another.
But specifically because of the way those schools were doing business, which he thought was immoral on some level. He didn't use the word immoral, but that's what he was implying, right?
It felt that way. And so if that was what he was implying, you don't get to have it both ways now. Feels fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does. I don't know that that'll cost him recruits.
No, it won't. I mean, why would you not go? If you're a recruit, I still maintain, if you're a wide receiver, I don't know why you would go to Michigan. But short of being a wide receiver, I don't know why you wouldn't go to Michigan, right? If you're a quarterback, lineman, they are turning out top tier talent all over the field. They're getting 5 stars. They're winning. It's a very prestigious. This is not going to be a reason to not do that. Now, if you weren't going to go there, you weren't going to go there. But it's
might get more street cred. He might get more credibility.
Oh my!
No. Number one recruiting class coming soon.
Well, they're not far off right now.
Yeah, you know what I mean. For years, this fan base is like, get in there and duke it out with Alabama. Clemson it was for a while, right? And Ohio State, obviously.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, exactly. And they're doing that. NIL is really what leveled this to some degree. It made this possible for them to get in and spend money without having to do it under the table. Yeah,
because a lot of I would say a lot of Big Ten schools. Michigan never seen Fab Five notwithstanding. Michigan, certainly Harbaugh has always, Beeline, all of the recent very successful programs have always seemed to be very clean, right? And so especially when you compare it to fill in the blank from another conference.
Kansas.
Carlos, your turn. We can go back and forth. Miami, right? Texas A&M.
It's just.
Will Wade, LSU.
I was on an earlier podcast with another colleague of ours, Mike Elrick, before we recorded this, and we were kind of joking about what would happen if this were Nick Saban, right? He'd get a raise. That's the joke, right? Right? It's long been the joke because it's true.
This would not be front new. I guess because Nick Saban would be getting because of the results of it, right? But none of this background talk about what does it matter? Who cares? If you're there, who cares? Here, it is its own discussion, and I think it merits discussion. But
it does, which is why folks who love college football in the South think we're all a bunch of hypocrites up here.
Why is that?
Because they're, you know what the saying is down there, right? Vince Ellis used to work for the Free Press. He'll tell you, he grew up in outside of Tuscaloosa. If you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Right.
You're not doing your job.
You just don't care.
Right. And besides, I think there was a wink understanding that, hey, these guys are making a lot of money for the school. We need to pay them anyway. So that's how they justified it, right? That they were being exploited, and we're going to slip them cash under the table, and Congress finally steps in, and we end up with the threat, and we get the NIL. But still, I don't know. It's all a mess. Why do we even have college sports, Tony? That's the real question.
That's not why I came on this
Lord.
podcast. That is not why I came on this podcast.
No,
Defend college sports, Tony. Now,
yeah, we're the only ones that do it.
Well, you know what? The one thing about this, and I totally understand. I appreciate. I understand it. I accept the whole. If you're going to play with the big boys, like Shawn said, you're going to have to get your hands dirty if you want to be a consistent team vying for a title every year. It's going to be so hard, right, to be the choir boy. However, I can't think of another program not a program, but a university that bills itself as a paragon of academic achievement and an academic institution the way that Michigan is. Maybe Texas, kind of, possibly. Possibly.
I went to Texas, Carlos. No, it's not the same. By the way, it's to your point, it's in their fight song.
Leaders and the best. And
that's how they refer to themselves.
Right. So that's the difference is, let's be honest. And what's the whole point? To Shawn's question, what's the point of college athletics? To promote the university, to promote enrollment, to promote endowment, to promote. Michigan, I think, just had a situation with one of their satellite campuses where I think their president, I think at Flint, is leaving because of declining enrollment and graduation rates. That's what really matters. It's kind of a vehicle for getting students into the universities, right? To promote it, its profile. Academics and sports are kind of separate, but they kind of work hand in hand in some way. So it's important for the whole university. And I'm sure there are very powerful alums and donors at Michigan who don't like this, who don't like the look, because now we're suddenly on the same playing field as Alabama in not a good way.
That, for Michigan, from my understanding, from what I've heard, certainly what they care about the most about it is certainly the optics of it. And really, this is mostly an exercise in optics because it was a victimless crime, right? And so, well, I guess unless you're another school who says, hey, our coaches would be coaching extra or more. But I just want to push back a little bit, Carlos, against the point that's saying eventually you have to get down and dirty, right? Like, I don't know that Michigan even saw this as doing that, right? And I don't think they are trying to, and I don't think they want to. And I mean, Board Manual, even with this NIL, right? They are continuing to hammer home. I just did Freep.com. It was a couple weeks ago, a rather long story about why it took Michigan a little longer to get NIL going, because it's all about alignment and the way and getting this new look of college athletics to align with institutional values, right? And this is certainly not that. However, that is still important. Is still extremely important to Michigan, and I don't think that, and they're not deviating from that. They are full steam ahead with, at least from publicly, what Board Manual said to us, what Jim Harbaugh has said to us, and what people on the board of regents like Jordan Acker, who I spoke to for that story, said exactly the same thing. And so, Shawn?
Yeah, it's the optics, Tony, right? I completely agree with you. I mean, think about it this way. Think about what Rich Rodriguez, right? So He gets caught practicing more. And I know a lot of the fan base at the time loved to poo-poo that, but that was actually far more egregious than what's just happened. They were trying to gain a competitive advantage. I guess you could say they're trying to gain this with recruiting, but they were literally making the players practice more than NCAA, right? They were limited to 20 hours a week, and they were doing it more, and they were feeling pressure. And the reason that story broke is because the players didn't like it, and they were unhappy, and they started talking to their parents, and the parents started complaining to reporters. That's how it got out. It wasn't that all got lost, and all that pushback. In any case, they didn't fire him for that. And they didn't fire him for that at all. That's one. To me, it's one. You're taking advantage and exploiting these kids and their kids. Maybe young adults, kids, whatever. They're in that gray area. And they didn't fire him at all until he went 3-9 or whatever it was. They fired him because he was losing.
Didn't we get to this earlier? It's all money, winning, this. And this is not a Michigan thing. This is every institution. I mean, look at what Northwestern is going through right now, right? And even and the lengths they will go to protect people like Pat Fitzgerald. We'll just name him by name. Even with losing, because of what he has meant. And I'm not at all comparing Jim Harbaugh to that. But I'm saying even at institutions where it is academics first and then athletics second, which everyone knows Northwestern is, that still happens. Think about the pressure and all the mounting and the Pandora's box has been opened with the money. And it's why you ask the question, where is college athletics? What's going on? And so everyone, if you're a fan or of this school or the rival school, is going to determine how bad and how egregious what this violation was.
To Carl's point about the front door, and that's true. That's absolutely true. Michigan has a fairly decent percentage of out-of-state students, right? They pay a lot more in tuition. A lot of those students come from the East Coast where college football is not a thing. And if you talk to them, and I'm sure you know them, Carlos, a lot of students come here from the East Coast because they want, quote, the Ivy League experience with football. And Michigan and used to be Notre Dame too, right? Those were the two schools in the country where you could get that. So yeah, to your point about the front door, but college football was actually started because Teddy Roosevelt wanted to give testosterone-fueled, raging young men something to do and keep them out of trouble. But then they all started dying on the football field, so that didn't work out so well, did it? But we're not here for a history lesson.
Unbelievable.
Let's just stop college sports. Can we just do that?
I'm going to go no, because it's still my job. It's still my job.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Any last questions or thoughts, Carlos, before we let this fella get on the road?
I just want to thank Tony for basically, coloring himself like Batman, saying that, he was Bruce Wayne going to the manor. He saw the bat signal from our podcast and turned around and found the fastest or closest bat cave he could to join us on the podcast. But it's very much appreciated, Tony. This is fantastic stuff. And again, I'd also like to thank Coach Harbaugh, who never lets us have a boring moment in sports. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, but it's always interesting. So thank you, Coach.
When you needed 24 more hours to make it down to Indy, it's not the best thing, but no, it's why we're employed, right? And Absolutely. So it is what it is. And man, I cannot wait to see. I was kind of not looking forward to going to Indy just because of how mundane it is, but yeah, I just want to see what's going to happen. There's a lot of fireworks. This is the last year of this look at the Big Ten. Now, I already had questions about the Michigan storylines, those 5 questions we were working on. Now those are all pushed. So
now you got one question.
One major question. So
there you go. Well,
here's my one question for Tony: Is there anybody who's looking forward to going down to Indy more than Ryan Day?
I know another colleague who likes St. Elmo's. I won't name him by name. Our media friends, but there's chum in the water. Certainly.
He would be, he's probably thinking just to keep his mouth shut for a while until he can beat them again, right?
Yeah. Can he do it? Can you do it?
That's a different level of expectation, even there.
He's going to stay he's the first Ohio State coach in 3 decades to lose?
Yeah, since John Cooper. Yeah.
2 in a row? Yeah. So
can you avoid not sprinkling some of his comments with, listen, I don't want to lie to you guys, so I'm just going to tell you this. I don't want to lie. Don't make me a liar, but, to tell you the truth, what I really believe is that, just little hidden things would just be delicious.
And I still can't, and Tony, you and I talked about this, I still can't believe this, not that we want to rehash all this, but that team he had last year to look so bad, and then a month later look like the best team, right? They should have beaten Georgia. They lose their stud receiver and the game changed. But yeah, that's what people are thinking in Columbus, right? They're not worried about Jim Harbaugh. It might be fun on the talk radios for a while, but they're thinking about, can this coach who had a team that was really in a lot of ways the best team in the country last year get punked at home?
Yeah.
Can he find a way to beat Michigan?
Yeah. And that is what matters. And of course, all the headlines are going to continue to be about Jim Harbaugh, one of the 3 to 5, maybe top 3, top 2, not 2 most famous coaches in college football after Saban. He's suspended. That's big time. But Michigan football is going to be 4-0, and he will be back. And they are more loaded than ever. And it's going to come down to Penn State and Ohio State, as it always did.
By the way, just one last thing. I'm looking as we speak right now, on the front page or the website of the Columbus Post-Dispatch, the Jim Harbaugh story is in the number 2 position on their front page. So they'll probably be talking. It'll probably matter for a while, I would guess, until November.
It's fun. It's fun for them. Yeah, not so
yeah.
fun for Michigan fans, but it's fun for them. That's how this always goes, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's a serious, like, when you have a Larry Nassar, then you don't have Michigan fans having fun with that. That's different. But when it's something like this, when it's just NCAA, regulations and nobody cares about it anyway, yeah, people love to have fun with that. That's for
How
sure.
about it?
All right, my man. Well, thanks again, as Carlos pointed out, for turning around and driving 2-3 minutes back to your house. That was
exactly. He made it sound like
that was a huge sacrifice. And really, I know Carlos pointed out to me. Carlos made a drive across the country yesterday. I think it was. He said, I don't know. I don't know where he was coming from, Idaho or something. He was tired because he had a long drive. But
it was the last one.
You know how it is with Carlos.
I do. Well, I'm glad that you're all safe, and I will now.
No. I was worried because he was driving through the desert with no water, and it's 120 degrees, and then he's in the mountains and there's snow, and you get worried for your pals that way. In any case, thanks, man. Have fun in Indy. Say hello for us, and screw St. Elmo's. St. Elmo's is fine. Go to Shapiro's Deli and get some pastrami or corned beef, whatever it is you like.
Pastrami.
Yeah. There you go.
Yep.
Well, there you go.
I'm with it.
Yeah. You're much better off. Our editor will thank you for that, too.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. See you, man. Carlos, can we take a break? Or are we done with the podcast?
Please.
Or is that enough? Are we done?
Oh, we promised the listener Lions, so we gotta move on to Lions.
All right. We'll come back with a briefer segment on the Lions with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, it's time to talk about the Lions as much as Jim Harbaugh is getting in our way. Because
from one championship team to another, Shawn.
The state deserves. I know you've got a connection to Michigan now, and we'll I'm sure talk about that over the course of the next few years. But the Lions are still a team of this region, and we're not going to let Jim Harbaugh. We're not going to let Jim Harbaugh get in the way of that, right?
You know what? Harbaugh, he's earned everything he has. He has our undivided attention whenever something happens. He speaks. He doesn't speak. He gets in trouble. He gets a job offer. Maybe he doesn't. Whatever, raise. I love all things Jim Harbaugh, and I'm not a Michigan fan at all. But he earns what he has. He earns my undying interest and attention. So no hate on Jim Harbaugh for all that.
No, we're not hating him at all. It's just the tendency to do that. All right. The Lions started their training camp. Have you been out there?
I will be out there shortly. I was on vacation. I know you don't like me taking vacation. You think I should be out there working and grinding like Coach Campbell wants everybody to do? Grit, grinding, doing up downs. But I need a little bit of break. But I'm back, Shawn. I'm ready. I'm ready to go full gusto at training camp. Wow, how many days? You've been out there, 7-8 days now?
I was out there a couple, but I was the first two, but I don't want, and I couldn't go the day because of recording because of too many podcasts, which is ridiculous. We're supposed to be writers. In any case, not that this show is ridiculous, Robin. Sorry, that's not the intent there at all. Yes, I've been out there a couple times. By the way, of course, I want you to take vacations. I want you to take a break, get your mind right, relax. It might be nice if you went someplace that was interesting from time to time. Go back home, go back to California, man. That'd be.
That's a good idea. I'm putting in for a vacation right now to go to LA, so maybe I won't be at training.
You should. No, you should.
I think it's 1,000 degrees today in Los Angeles. So
I know. In any case, I'm glad you got a break. Welcome back. What the heck? Can you believe this? I hate to call a hype train because that's what Dan Campbell called it, but he did. He actually said it was out of control. And now he's doing that for very coachy reasons, right? He's trying to keep his players focused and all that stuff. But what do you think, man, of this? When the Lions coach is saying, "Hey, the hype train's out of control," what are your thoughts?
I love that he's that self-aware, and I don't remember. I remember looking at the transcript. I don't remember if anybody followed up on it but he brought that up on his own. and saying, I don't want to get into it, blah, blah, blah. But I think he clearly kind of didn't want to get into it. If I'd been there, I definitely would have pushed him on it. But I mean, I think you need to. I think you need to. And I think some other players have talked about it. I don't know if Jared Goff did or whoever it might have been. But you have, I mean, come on. Let's not pretend that this isn't happening, that they're the darlings of the NFL. Even Goff had fun with, how do we go from 9-8? We didn't even get to the playoffs, and now we're one of the favorites in the NFL. I think it's kind of funny. And he's right. They haven't proved anything, really. They just proved that they have potential, but anything can derail potential. And I think the Lions fans are forever going to be Charlie Brown, wondering if Lucy's going to actually pull the ball or keep the ball there. They always hope she's going to, keep the ball there and they're going to kick it. But something always happens, it seems. An injury, a weird coaching thing, something happens. So, and I'm not saying that I'm not trying to poop on the team or anything, but just, this is the story of the team since 1957, right? I mean, can they get a little momentum, something happens, they fall back, they have moderate success. They just never seem to gain that traction and keep that steady forward momentum. It's really hard for them to do that. So I think that the fans right now have reason to hope. But I think Campbell, and they know. I mean, they're not going to tell their players, don't go on your phones, don't watch TV, don't listen to reports, whatever.
They're not.
You're hearing it everywhere. So good. Acknowledge it. It doesn't mean anything. When these guys are out, they're fighting for jobs. There's a lot of roster turnover. Yeah, okay, great. There's maybe some of them. Maybe there might be an odd player here and there who thinks, hey, I had a pretty good year last year. I wonder if I'll make the Pro Bowl this year. I got to do that, or I'm in a contract year, whatever it might be. But as a whole, the team, they don't really think that way. It's just, this is who we are. This is what we need to do. This is our scheme. This is how we practice. This is what the coach wants. It's an exhausting sport, exhausting time in camp. They're holed up in a hotel with curfews. So I don't know if you really have enough time to really worry too much about what people are saying and how they're building you up or tearing you down. So he's right. There's hype right now. And that's all the preseason and training camp is, right? Hype. Then the games start getting played. Once they go to Kansas City, then we'll know a little bit more.
Well, I mean, maybe for journalists it's hype, but for them, for the Lions, the preseason and camp is the difference between, having a job or not for a lot of players. Yeah. I mean, it's very real. It's not hype. It's also for the coaches to see, does this person deserve a starting job wherever, right? So there's a lot of real decisions that get made through training camp. So it's really important. But yes, for us, without benefit of real games, we're like, okay, it's all speculation on what the real games will look like. So that's where the hype can come in, coming off that. But let's talk about this for a second. Let's break this down a little bit. And I'm not talking about guards that are pulling, about why there is so much. Because Jared Goff did say this. And by the way, Campbell was asked about it a couple more times, from different, right, on the hype stuff, which in the past he's always been happy to talk about. So it was interesting that he brought it up this time. It was a little different, for sure. But there were several follow-ups to it. It just didn't, go maybe where you wanted it to go. I mean, who knows? Maybe you don't have an idea where you want it to go. You're just curious what he thinks. In any case, so Carlos, why do you think, to Goff's point, they're 9-8, right? I mean, he's sort of kidding, but he's sort of not. Why this team? Why this season? Why all these old-time fans going around saying they haven't been this excited for a season at least since the 91 year, but that year wasn't that. Did people know that the team is going to be 12-4, whatever they were that year, and win the playoff game? And I mean, I was living here then. I don't remember that summer there anything like this. The media landscape's different, but what is it? I mean, I have my theories, but I want to know what you think. Why this season, off a 9-8 season? Why is it out of control? Why are the NFL talking about the Lions as if they're, new to the league? It's all over the country, right?
Well, I mean, there's Vegas that has a lot to do with it. And I think it's part of it is they're in what you would consider a weak division this year. But I think locally, Michigan fans, fans in Michigan who are Lions fans, local fans, I think what they see is they've seen kind of steady progress. it hasn't come without its difficulties and struggles, but you've seen a lot of progress, steady progress. But more than that, it seems like there's not any weird stuff going on. They're not trying to be the Patriots. It's not, Jim Caldwell, having a good year and a bad year, good year and a bad year, or mediocre year, good year, but, mediocre year, whatever. So what's happening, I think, organizationally is they seem to have hit the reset button with Sheila Ford Hamp in control, hired the right people at the top, people who seem to be making the right decisions. And a lot of it is Dan Campbell, your favorite coach of, the millennium probably, but Dan Campbell, he's smart, he's funny, he's entertaining, he's truthful, he doesn't duck things. He's everything you would want in a coach, I would imagine, right? A former player who looks like a dude and who could still play. Just everything about him oozes like the central casting, coach or whatever. So I think all of that works together in giving people a sense of confidence. And we've talked about this many times, how much people are yearning in this region for the Lions to finally win and be a consistent winner. They've waited and waited. Generations have died off. Grandfathers have been lowered into the ground and, with sobbing, family around them saying, I wish my granddad had seen the Lions win, but he didn't. So, there's been so much generational disappointment in this team that team is they're primed. The fans are just primed to hope for something, and they'll take anything. That's why Jared Goff, I think, is right, because as an outsider, he's like, he's seen the Rams get to the Super Bowl. He's seen a good team, get there and even come from nothing great, but get there. And with the Lions, I mean, they had to fire, a coach. They started 1-6. You were going to start talking about Campbell getting fired and hot seats, and that was going to happen pretty soon. Mm-hmm. And suddenly they finished, 8-2, and everything's hunky dory and great. And part of it is also the context of beating Green Bay in Green Bay, sending Aaron Rodgers out a loser, in Lambeau Field, which is, just the kind of salve on the spirit of Lions fans that they've always hoped for. It couldn't have ended better for them, for Aaron Rodgers' tenure. So all these little things, I think it makes people feel good. It's all these little victories and steps in the right direction. And I think that's warranted. I don't blame them for feeling so optimistic. I fully expect them to win the division, barring some weird thing happening with terrible luck with injuries or whatever. But they should feel encouraged. And now the Lions have to manage those expectations and make something of them.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned the Green Bay game, because you think about what it would feel like right now if they'd lost that game. People would still be hopeful, right? Then they would have finished 7-3, which is still respectable. It would not have been a winning record, right? It would have been 8-9 instead of 9-8. And that there's a tiny bit of psychology with that. People would still be hopeful. I don't know that we'd quite be where we're at, though, with all this if they had not won that game. And I think part of it, to your point, yes, is Green Bay at Lambeau for sure. It was also the kind of game that unfolded. It was a really kind of physical late season game that felt a little bit like a playoff game. Let's just be real.
Absolutely gutsy. Great game.
It did. And the way they won that game against, that team, that quarterback, okay, maybe not the best Packers team in the last 10 years, but still, they were a playoff type team. So to win the game the way they did on the road at the end of the year under the lights, to get flexed in the schedule like that, where they sort of had the stage themselves, that also made it, I think, for a lot of fans feel sort of like a playoff game. I just think that carried over.
Absolutely.
Like you said, I think there's hope. If they lose 20-16 instead of win, I don't know what the final score was that night, but it was somewhere around there. If they lose by 3 or 4 instead of win by 3 or 4, there's still momentum, right? For sure. But that took it to some other place.
I'll say this, if you're a Lions fan, I would hope, unfortunately, most people didn't, but if you're a Lions fan, a longtime Lions fan, you deserved to be at that game because it was a playoff atmosphere. The way that they sent those Packers fans, not quite sobbing out of Lambeau, but certainly sad, knowing what that meant, that Aaron Rodgers is probably gone. I mean, every year, who knows? Aaron Rodgers always rattles the saber, had always rattled the saber, but to see them, to deal your hated foe that kind of a loss, at home in the primetime season finale, and the way that the Lions fans stuck around, and it was this joyous atmosphere of the people who went up there. And the locker room, was a very happy. It felt like they'd won a big game, like a playoff game. I don't know what a winning playoff game must feel like for Lions, but it kind of felt like that, like a big, big deal. So I would wish that, if I could, let every Lions fan experience that, because that was that. And I understood from that time. I mean, it really felt like this is extrapolating. This is what fans have been waiting for. And I can just imagine watching that game at home. If you're a Lions fan, is how soothing and comforting and feel, it just makes you feel so good. And now we talk about this every year. It's like, the players say it, the coaches say it. The one season does not always have that much to do with the next season. It does to some extent, as far as the team you keep. And they've talked about, even this year in training camp, they've already talked about, I think it was Jared Goff, like, now it's tweaks. We know the offense, we know the base, we know the installations, all these things. Like, now we can start off from a more advanced place than terminology and verbiage and all this other stuff. So that gives them a little bit of an advantage, and that's nice. But yeah, just because you finish strong doesn't mean you're going to start strong, unless you're some whatever great Super Bowl, either the Bengals or the Chiefs or whatever. So they still have a lot to prove. And I think that's what Jared Goff is talking about. He doesn't want people to think, his teammates, whatever, like, just because we finish strong, we're going to start strong. Every season brings its own unique challenges. But it's good to have. It's better to have those expectations than not to have them. So, and I think that's, let's be honest. I mean, the Lions are certainly capitalizing on. I'm sure they're selling more season tickets. Their branding, their media, whatever it is, their PR stuff. Their merchandise. They can charge more. They can have a packed stadium. All that, encourage that atmosphere. So that's all part of it. It's and they deserve to do that. It makes sense, but. We're going to see. We're going to see how, for the first time in a long time, big, how this team measures up to big expectations.
No question. It's funny you were talking about golf with that. I thought about writing about that the other day when I was at the training camp in Allen Park. But then their new receiver, Denzel Mims, spoke for the first time. And so I just decided to kind of go with the news of the day and figure, because in training camp, there are going to be a lot of opportunities to do. There's some evergreen stuff, as we would say, inside the business. But one thing Mims did say was ask about Campbell. And he said, "Oh, my God, he's huge, man. I didn't expect him to be that big, big, right?" Yeah, right. So, but just the way he talked about Campbell, you could see this. I don't want to call it a reverence yet, but you can see it. We've heard it from enough places now that you can kind of, you get in the sense that it's really the players generally like him, and he's still going to have to win when it gets down to it, or none of that'll matter. But getting back to your thoughts on why and the Green Bay, yes, but I also think, again, and you may have mentioned this a little bit, but I love the idea of the steady, slow progress, and that the fans have seen that in a way that maybe they haven't in a while. So that's one, two. And I know you love to dismiss this and poke fun at this, but most football fans understand that it's hard to really, really win without players at the line of scrimmage, preferably on both sides. And there's a sense that this team is building towards something. The offensive line's maybe a little further ahead than the defensive line, and I think there's, especially with the offensive line, there's an idea that there's an association of longevity with that. So if you can get that in place, then you can be reasonably at least competitive while you kind of build out around it. So I think that's part of it. And then the other thing, the one thing you didn't mention, but I know I've talked about this, is Brad Holmes. So it's not just the coach or the progress, the linear, the Green Bay win, all that, the building from the inside out, which feels like more foundational. But Holmes we'll see what happens, but he's starting to develop a little bit of a track record of being able to identify talent. And that's been one of the biggest criticisms and most frustrating things for this fan base for years is, can you string a couple of drafts together?
Yeah,
and,
well, that's what I meant.
And they hopefully can, right? Right.
I meant that. I mean, as getting the right people at the top, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, for sure. It's not Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. We're going to build the Patriots, or do the Patriots. And, so yeah, that's a lot of it. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. It's Brad Holmes is as big a part of this as anything. Dan Campbell is the media star, to us, but both those guys work in lockstep, and it's worked. It has shown a lot of promise. But as Jared Goff still says, 9-8. You're a 9-8 team, so all that has.
Yeah,
and you know what?
Sure.
And I got a lot of poop on this when they won 3 games, whatever, 3.5 games. A couple of years ago, I was like, listen, even though they didn't win a lot, they showed some progress. They didn't get blown out very often, and be like,
what'd you say? What'd you say? Wait. What'd you say? You got a lot of poop?
A lot of poop on that. Yeah, people
or poo. Poo.
You can
poop?
Choose your epithet, Shawn. One of the two, whichever one.
Okay.
I don't like to use potty mouth language on this podcast, but people were giving me guff about not guff, but guff about this and I was like, listen, you got to appreciate this season for what it is. It's a new team, new coach, new general manager, first time, blah blah blah. You got to just see some progress, and even the second year, let's just see some more progress. But this should not be. I did not think they would make a playoff last year. Let's just see what happens. And I was even more impressed that the plane was going into the side of the mountain, and Campbell especially, took control of the rudder and boom, saved it. And not only that, but he stuck the landing too, and should have gotten into the playoffs. So yeah, I mean that's all. Those are all signs. Now the next sign is get to the playoffs, and I think you wrote about that. The bar is kind of low. Can this be the first team to get to the playoffs in a while for any of the Detroit teams? There would be, I'm sure, expectations for them to do more than just get to the playoffs. But I think if they just get to the playoffs, if they win the division, that would be huge. But yeah, that's the expectation for this team. And I think anything short of, even if they win, just get in as a wild card, that would be disappointment. But if they just get to the playoffs, I think that would go a long way. But it'd be interesting, wouldn't it? I mean, if they're fighting for the division, what if they win the division but they lose the playoff game? That would be a fascinating story.
No, that will sting fans, because they will have had 4 months to get used to the idea that it's a pretty good team, right? And then you get your hopes up even more at that point. But again, not again, sorry, but you were talking about the 3 wins in the first year and the poop that you got. And I remember getting the same thing, because you and I were in lockstep during that period, that they were actually better, that they looked better week to week, even though it wasn't showing up. And then finally they won a couple late or whatever. And I remember writing very similar things. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I was walking off the field with Dave Burkett, the great Dave Burkett, who covers the Lions for us, who we are going to get in here soon in this podcast space. And we were walking off the practice field a couple of days ago and talking about the potential of this team and talking about Campbell and what kind of coach he really is. And I said, the thing that sticks with me, and I told him what you just said, what you just said to me, the thing that has always stuck with me is how hard that team played at the end of a 2 and whatever they were, 13, 4, you know what I mean? The way they were competing with that record, that just stuck with me. And I remember you and I even probably talking about it at the time. That you don't know for sure, but you're like, there might be a little something there. And Dave told me a story about somebody he talked to, was very, not well known, but plugged into the NFL, into the NFL, works for the NFL in their capacity, and knows about a lot of things, and told him when Dan Campbell was hired that, okay, this guy's either going to be a huge flame out and it's not going to work at all, and it'll be fairly apparent quickly, or he's going to change the culture and how you think about the Lions. And it's not going to be in between. He's either going to be like a coach that gets remembered in that region for a long time, or he's going to be awful. And it's probably still too soon to say, but I thought that was interesting.
Dan Campbell will be, I think, already he's going to be remembered in a very positive light, unless something significant happens that derails that narrative. I think there's sometimes you can just feel it. I think with the coach, when you've been around enough coaches, that there's this kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, like this underpinning to who they are, how they approach things. And I think with Dan Campbell, there's no question in my mind, he will be the first Lions coach in a really long time to get another head coaching job, even if it doesn't work out in Detroit, because I think he presents himself so well. And there's no weirdness, no weird, I'm tied to this, philosophy or way of doing things, or, a lot of, I don't know why, it's a lot of NFL coaches are like that. Like, it's got to be this way, this system, whatever. And he's not like that. And I think that's his saving grace, is how I think we honestly, Shawn, I think the media appreciates this more than the players do. I mean, the players come in and let's be honest, they go through so many coaches, this coach, that coach, this team, whatever, free agent, tryout, blah, blah, blah. This, it's like, hey, they see the coach in a certain way of how are you coaching me as a player, as a linebacker, as a quarterback, as a safety, whatever, what's my interaction with you? And a lot of times these guys, most of their interaction is with their position coach, maybe other than the quarterback, but that's really their coach. And Campbell's kind of the overseer of the whole thing, but to us, Campbell is the Lions. We see him all the time, almost every day, in training camp, almost every single day he talks. And we appreciate all the nuance, all the different things he has to navigate organizationally, from top to bottom. And I think we also, veteran sports writers who bounced around and seen a lot of different coaches in a lot of different sports, we really appreciate the difference that Campbell brings. And that there's this just way about him that he's accepting of his failings, of his shortcomings. He accepts also his successes. He deals with us very well. He seems to be fair to the players and to the staff. And you hear this about, we talk to the media, the PR people too, and, from different teams, and you hear, the coach is a little bit standoffish, or he's paranoid.
When they like a coach, they let us know when they like their coach.
Absolutely.
And when they don't.
Absolutely.
They do.
And you've never heard about, I don't think people are like, to the listener out there, people aren't in love with Dan Campbell. The organization, from my understanding, the PR people, the players, they're not in love with Dan Campbell. They appreciate him. They like him. But I think it's the media that really sees that holistic picture in a different way. And we really appreciate him in a different way. And I think but I think we kind of have the perspective of ownership in some way of how do you navigate, how do you guide this organization? And Brad Holmes gets a lot of credit for this too, but we don't interact with him as much. But Dan Campbell really knows how to, manage up, manage laterally, and manage down. And he's so good at it. I think that I would expect him to have success with the Lions, but even if it doesn't come, he doesn't quite have as, great success as you would think he would or should, winning several playoff games, getting in, conference championships, all that kind of stuff. If that doesn't happen, I think he's going to get hired in a second. In a hot minute, he'll get hired by another team because he's proved already in 3 years that he knows how to guide a team, how to guide a team, not only, a team that struggled and how to get the most out of them. And now we're going to see, does he know how to guide a winning team, a team with expectations? That's the next step for Dan Campbell. But I think there's just a thing about him that's really, it's hard to really define it exactly, but he has that presence about him. And it's not an imperious thing. It's just
no, not at all.
Kind of humanness to him. Which it belies everything when you see him and the way he talks and everything. Like you think, he's going to be a dude, just a meathead. Nope, complete opposite.
No, and fans pick up on that. It's funny how I was talking to a sister-in-law actually the other day, and she was like, "I'm in love with him." She's not even a football fan, but dude, there's something about, and I hear that over and over and over. Now there's some diehard fans, I'm sure, that don't like the way he manages at the end of the game or the clock manager or whatever. They could nitpick, but for a lot of people out there, especially casual Lions fans who are sort of start getting, coming back around because of what happened at the end of the year, and see him speak or listen to him speak, to your point, he's got something that people relate to. As far as players like to play for him, but that comes through on the camera, or if you hear him on the radio. He's just he's got that quality. He just does. And this, to me, this region and this fan base is just ready to embrace him like they haven't embraced the coach in a long, long time, if they can take the next step, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're so ready to wrap their arms completely around him.
Absolutely.
You can feel it. You can feel it. They're not quite there because they want to, there's too much, 60 years of PTSD, right? So they're not quite there, but you can feel that. I'm with you, man. It should be interesting and fun. He's just got that ability to relate to all kinds of people, and he's authentic and he's himself, and he's not afraid. Real quickly, I remember when I was in Carolina when they lost to Carolina, and I remember after the game, he talked about some technical stuff and not fitting the gaps because they gave him 300 yards, and you got into some football talk. But really, his point of that whole news conference was, I didn't have them ready, because at that point they had won 4 in a row, 5 in a row. I can't remember, right? They had started winning. And he felt like he let up or didn't understand that there was a lesson he had to learn about expectations. That was the first time, people were thinking playoffs, remember? And expectation. And I remember the way he talked after that game was, I've got to figure that out. This is a different football team than I was coaching 6 weeks ago. And he had to learn that. And he was very open about how he had not done it. And I think that's endearing too.
That is part of it, is the way he's owned his mistakes and owned his struggles or his lack of preparation. And I think that probably goes back to him as a player, he had moderate potential as a player, as an NFL player, and he had to make the most of it. And part of it, a lot of the reason that he had a fairly long career was, learning what could make him successful, learning what his shortcomings were, accepting them, learning from his mistakes, and getting better and gaining people's trust, coaches' trusts. And as a coach, that's what you got to do too. Is you got to gain everybody's trust. People got to believe in you. You got to lead them. They got to follow. And that's I remember your other second favorite coach, Derek Lalonde. He talked about it, I think last year, maybe it was, where he said he thought, hey, I'd like to get, Coach Campbell in here, and he knows that Campbell has some kind of secret sauce going over there.
He does.
And coaches, they understand, they relate, like, what's going on over there? Like they were headed to, a huge, terrible problem with that start, and somehow he pulled it out and got better. That's magic, man. To be able to do something like that, keep it all together and the way he did it in the most human of ways, not throwing Aubrey Pleasant under the bus, not, it's you people, if you don't stand up, you're gone, and blah, blah, blah. And this is the NFL, blah, as like I hated to do it. I didn't want to do it, but I had to do it. And, you believed him, you believed that he didn't want to do it, and he probably waited longer to do it than he should have, but he finally did it. And the same thing with Anthony Lynn. The two major catastrophic problems in the coaching ranks back-to-back years, and now you're going...
Two guys he really liked.
Two guys he really liked, really respected. Frankly, Aubrey Pleasant, everybody liked him too. And, in the media, I thought that guy was like, man, this guy has head coaching potential or coordinator potential, written the way he, thinks about players, talks about the game, talks to us, whatever. So that's to me, if you can negotiate that in a successful way, not only that you're winning, but that you handle it well, you avoid drama and turmoil and what's going on with this team and this organization. Oh my God, it's the Lions SOL again. And, he to pull this team out of that potentially dark space, was so impressive. Can't remember last time I've seen something like that happen. So that's the kind of thing. And, when it all ends, I mean, hey, it's the Herm Edwards used to say, we all rent the whistle. One day, Campbell's not going to be the head coach of the Lions for some reason. And, I'm sure whoever it is, some owner from another team's going to call Sheila Hamp and ask her, and she's going to be like, yep, he was great. This is the guy you want. Just didn't work out after a while, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But he's the guy. He'll get another head coaching job.
No, I agree with you. I mean, because at some point you still have to have talent, right? You have to have talent.
No,
I mean,
yeah. Well, everybody has talent in the NFL. I mean,
in the NFL, it's not quite disparate as you see in some of the other pro leagues, but no, for sure, some coaches just have that thing. It reminds me a little bit of Izzo. You think, how does a 67-year-old dude from the UP get on with an 18-year-old from Gary, Indiana, or whatever? It's just right, but
Absolutely.
He does. He does, and he'll have teams that will struggle. All of a sudden, they'll find their way, and they're in the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight or the Final Four, or whatever. It's very similar to that,
Yes,
and it's rare. There are a lot of good coaches out there. I think all four coaches in Detroit right now are. I mean, Monty Williams is statistically, by his resume, objectively a good coach.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know about Lalonde, whose name I butcher every time I say it.
That's why you don't work for the Detroit media.
I know. I like his vibe, for lack of a better word. But I got it on the Denzel Mims kept talking about vibe, so I got that on my mind. And AJ Hinch just won a World Series, right? So they're good coaches in town, but I don't know that any of them have the combination as long as the winning comes. If the winning comes, I'm not sure any of them have the combo to connect and win like Campbell. We'll see.
He does. He definitely has that presence about him and that personality that's very just endearing to the media, especially, I think. But he definitely has something different about him that you sense has a lot of potential. But
it does,
yeah,
and that's the word right now.
He's got to win.
He does. That's it. They got to win. That's the business. All right, I thought this was going to be the shorter segment. This may end up being the longer segment. We need a guest. We need to just keep a guest for the whole show to keep us in check. You know what I mean?
We'll have Tony for a double segment last.
Yeah. But let's take one last quick break and come back with a favorite thing and wrap the show up. Sound good?
Perfect.
All right. We'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. We need to wrap this show up, Carlos, and get folks out of here. Get you out of here. You need some sleep. You drove across the country. You need some rest.
I drove across several continents for you, Shawn, just to be here on time.
Thank you.
As you would expect me. So yes, yeah. Well, my favorite thing was that our longtime former colleague John Lowe was a longtime Tigers beat writer for the Free Press, was inducted into the Hall of Fame, Baseball Hall of Fame, in the media wing for his contributions to covering the sport for so many years so well. John was a great student of the game, with great historical perspective on everything he wrote. But more than that, the thing I remember working with John, when I'd go to cover a game or write a sidebar or whatever, was just how he's just a really pleasant, giving person. And he, in the Free Press, I think it was on Sunday, I believe, over the weekend, when he was inducted, we ran testimonials from former colleagues, editors, writers, alumni from the Free Press, and our good buddy John Paul Morosi, who worked with John for a while and now works for MLB and NHL. Another wonderful human, as good a person as you'll find in media. Had a fun testimonial where he talked about that he didn't go to school at Michigan. As he said, he went to school in the greater Boston area because he went through such pains to avoid saying he went to Harvard. But he didn't go to Michigan, but his girlfriend and who turned out to be his wife now, and they've been married forever and have kids. But she went to Michigan. So when he'd go visit her, he had a friend, I think, who wrote for the Michigan Daily. And so he would go there and John would work with the Daily writers, the students at Michigan. I think where it was one day a week, he'd go and stop. And there was always this sort of generous spirit about John that way. I think he would always talk to young writers and young journalists and was always giving. And I remember having conversations with him either when I was an editor. And I remember one of the fun things when I started covering golf, I forget if he talked about it or he sent me an email or something. He liked something I wrote and he said, well, as I always say, the smaller the ball, the better the writing. So I always appreciated his sense of humor and commiserating with him. And it was always fun to be in the press box. And John he'd been around for so long and knew so many people. He always did a good job of being in the press box, and he'd grab somebody. One time I remember, like, I'm sitting there writing my story, before the game starts and writing a notebook, whatever. I look over, John's sitting next to me, and then to the other side of John is Jim Palmer, who's doing radio for the Orioles, whatever it was. And just, he's John Lowe. Of course, he's going to talk to Jim Palmer, just get him to chat, come over to press row and talk for a few minutes about some historic thing or whatever it was. So it was always fun to read John's stories, his accounts of the game, his historical perspective, but also the people he could get to talk to him was certainly impressive. And I've always loved baseball writing. John did it as well as anybody for a really long time. So congratulations to John Lowe. As his favorite catchphrase was outstanding. He'd always say outstanding as an affirmative. So an outstanding achievement for an outstanding reporter for an outstanding career. So congratulations, John.
Well, I'll definitely second that. He led the way for a long time and taught a lot of folks how to conduct themselves and showed that you didn't have to get too stressed out either.
Calming presence.
He was fairly calm. And I did occasionally see him get worked up on, but that's relative. It wasn't flying around and cussing out and all that. So that was always nice to see. My favorite thing is just the idea of perspective. You know what I mean? Relativity. Maybe not Einstein's relativity. That's way, that's your level of smart, not mine. But after spending almost a week in 115, 116, 117, I think that 119 or 118 was the highest. And those kind of temperatures out in the desert for the NBA Summer League, and to get back and it's warming up to the day we're recording. It warmed up. I don't know what the temperature was. It's probably pushing 90s. It's supposed to be 90s here, right? For really the first time this summer, we might have dipped up. But normally when it gets to this time of the summer, you get up in the 90s, it's not all that pleasant, but it feels like nothing, Carlos. I'm like, I can handle this, even with the humidity difference between the desert, the whole dry heat thing. So yeah, the perspective. All of a sudden, 90 doesn't feel too bad. And here I am doing a lovely podcast with you. We had a pre-show disagreement. We just go on the air and everything's all good. That's also, perspective, because that's what you do, right? And if we were doing this in the studio, which we are going to at some point, I hope, right? I'd give you a hug.
Aw.
With no mask.
I would too, Shawn. I appreciate that. Yeah, it would be. I think it explains our disagreement. I think you had some heat sickness or something. I mean, I grew up in L.A., in the Badlands, and 100 degree every day in the summer, so it was not a problem. I'm used to that, but I know you're not. You're a Midwesterner, so you get it. It's a little hard.
I was in LA last week for a few hours, and it was 74 degrees. So
in LA,
but that's
74?
But that's LA. Yeah, it was 74, maybe 75. It was nice. It was cool. But LAX is almost at the water too. So
yeah, being in your hotel room or in the hotel pool doesn't count, by the way.
No, I wasn't there, but you were. I was just at the airport, but you were inland a little bit, and as you know, I mean, Christ, excuse the language. the further inland you go in California, the more you're like getting into Vegas, Phoenix temperatures.
That's right.
Palm Springs is, yeah. Not that you lived in Palm Springs.
I lived in Riverside. I went to school in Riverside for a while. That's darn near Palm Springs.
It's not far. I flew right over Riverside. And the only reason I know that is, when you take off in LAX, you go out, you almost always take off to the west and you loop out over the Pacific and then come back. And you're a pretty decent elevation when you come back because of traffic patterns. Anyway, that area is so big, the LA County, than just everything else. And at one point, it goes on and on and on. I looked down, I looked at the map in the seat. I thought, I wonder what burb this is. I wonder if this is where Carlos grew up. I was actually literally thinking that. And it said Riverside. And I said, oh, okay, I've been there before. But it was kind of interesting to see it. Yeah. Because not too far beyond Riverside was the desert.
Yes. Yeah, you don't have to go very far in Southern California to be outside of Orange County and LA and the nice spots, and then you're in. It's all semi-arid desert. It's really hot. So, but I'm glad you overcame your heat exhaustion and gained some perspective. And it's not that bad.
It's maybe we don't want to go quite that far, but that's a nice story that you can tell yourself. But I respect your right to tell your own stories to yourself. You know what I mean? It's what keeps you, all of us, we all do it, right? It's what keeps you from going insane. So
that's right.
That's the way it goes. All right, man. Let's wrap this up and get out of here until we. Do we need to thank anybody? We want to thank Robin.
We have to thank Robin. Poor Robin Chan, our amazing producer, had to listen to our going back and forth about our pregame huddle chat. We could not do this without you, Robin. You should put in for combat pay or something, hazard pay for this week. But the person who's going to make that, the people going to make that possible are Kirk and Crawford and Angela Delgado, our executive producers. And the person who's going to make all that possible, too, if she ever hears about it, we all might get chastised or whatever, is our editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols. But Shawn, the most important person, as always, every week, is who?
The listener, always. It's always about the listener. And our listeners are smart. And I'm just pointing that out.
I love our listeners.
Just like our readers are smart. Yeah, the listener's smart. Sometimes he emails us. He's clearly smart. In any case, we want to thank them, thank y'all, thank you. Let's get all this phrasing right here. And obviously, you can find us wherever you find your favorite podcasts, Spotify, Apple. Rate us when you get there. Subscribe, please. Leave us whatever kind of comment you'd like. That would be great. We're trying to hit 10 listeners, I think. So if we could get that, we'll get a bonus.
Double digits.
Robin will get a promotion, and everything would be great. All right, Carlos. Until next week, when we're back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn, I bid you farewell, my friend.